I want to try and talk about, I know a lot of you probably followed the story in Atlanta. There was the Rayshard Brooks, a black man, was killed by a white Atlanta police officer in an incident in a Wendy's parking lot. And I'm going to tell you, I talked with Matt the Wonderful on the way in today, and even before we got started, about whether or not to play the clip. I actually have a clip that goes from the very beginning of the officer's interaction with this gentleman, Rayshard Brooks, and it goes all the way from their first conversation with him all the way until he ends up still in that parking lot, same parking lot of Wendy's, being shot by this police officer. And he died at the hospital later. Rayshard Brooks did. And this is going to become one of the stories, and his name will be added to the other stories that become the kind of narrative the Black Lives Matter movement uses. They just throw out a list of names, and everybody's life matters. Everyone's life matters. And the loss of life is always horrific, and the loss of life in a violent manner is always horrific. And having police officers who do not wake up every day and think, gee, I sure hope I can get out there and take someone's life today. It's about the last thing they ever want to do. They do not want to go around killing citizens. They realize what will happen. They realize if they use their service revolver and end up killing someone, or even shooting someone and not killing them, there's going to be a major review. There's going to be major backlash. They're probably going to lose their job. They may get prosecuted. They're all aware of the very, very tense and toxic environment we're in our country. Police officers do not set out to shoot people. They actually don't want this. They do not want to become the next headline. But I've decided, after going back and forth and talking to Matt, that I don't want to play this video on this show. But if you want to see a video that goes from beginning to end, you can go to our website, americacanwetalk.org. And on the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links, you can click on the video, and it's labeled the Rayshard Brooks incident, Atlanta incident, and you can click on it and watch it yourself. But what I want to do is tell you, because obviously the narrative is getting spun immediately, but I want to just tell you what happened. So Rayshard Brooks was asleep in his car in the parking lot of a Wendy's, not over in the corner, out of the way, in the drive-through lane. So he's in the drive-through lane at Wendy's in Atlanta. Rayshard Brooks is black. And so and Atlanta has a very, very large black population. And so he's in line, he's in the lane where the drive-through lane is, but he's sound asleep. So someone inside Wendy's called the police and said, hey, there's a guy blocking the drive-through lane, and he appears asleep. So the police came and they talked to him. And the beginning of the video, at which I'm not going to show, I've decided, but the beginning of the video is a very calm Rayshard Brooks gets out of his car. The officers give him a breathalyzer test because I think he maybe smelled like alcohol, because it's not usual to fall asleep in your car when you're in the drive-through lane of a fast food place. So they give him the field sobriety test. He fails it. He's well over the limit. He's drunk. So the police say, okay, well, they can't, so they're going to arrest him. So he's standing up talking to him, very calm. They say, okay, the officer said, well, I'm going to have to bring you in because you're over the legal limit. You can't be driving like this. You can't be driving, when you're drunk. So Brooks looks like he's going to very peacefully turn around. He begins to turn around. The officer says, put your hands behind your back. He's going to handcuff him. And then Rayshard Brooks exploded. There are two officers and then one gentleman being arrested. This is Rayshard Brooks. Huge battle on the ground. Fist fighting, punching, and the two officers are having a very difficult time restraining one guy. Very hard time restraining him, and he's fighting back. You hear the taser thing go off. The other officer's taser goes off, and you hear the officers saying over and over, please stop resisting. Please stop resisting. Calm voice. No, as the left always tries to claim, no, racist language. No foul language, just kept saying, please stop resisting, please stop resisting. Rayshard Brooks is fighting two officers. He's kind of winning, and he ends up punching one of the officers. Really, really big battle. And then you hear one of them yelling, he's going for my gun. So Rayshard Brooks ends up with the taser gun belonging to one of the officers. So he runs away with the taser gun. He's got the taser gun in his hands. The officers have been in this brutal brawl with him on the ground out inside this Wendy's, and Rayshard Brooks, you can see on the video, turns. He's got the taser gun in his hand, turns back and aims it toward the officer. You hear the other officer yell, "He's going to tase you, he's going to tase you." And that is when the shot is fired. So there will be a lot of discussion. This obviously every time an officer discharges his weapon, there's an investigation. There should be. When an officer discharges his gun and results in the death of a citizen, there's going to be a major investigation. And right away, the Atlanta police fired the officer who fired his gun, and the other officer has been placed on some kind of administrative or desk job leave, and the chief of police resigned. So that is the story, and you can see it yourself. You don't have to believe my version. Go watch it yourself. That is what happened. So where we got from that is that the Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor, she's a black woman politician. She ran for governor. She was formerly a member of the Georgia legislature. She has gone on the news and called it, "This was murder." That's her terminology. This was murder. In fact, she even used the expression, I won't find it fast enough. She calls it murder of a man because he was asleep at a drive-thru. And I just want to plant that seed for you. This is the kind of narrative that Stacey Abrams is putting out there. He did not end up being shot because he was asleep in the at a restaurant. What happens, what I just laid out for you, maybe there are arguments that, this is a situation where, the officer, even if this Rayshard Brooks had succeeded in tasing the officer, even if he had tased him and the taser had, hit him and really tased him, you can still argue, okay, but that's not fatal. It's not fatal. That's why they have tasers, because they aren't fatal, because they're intended to just, immobilize you and enable the officer to get control of the situation. So maybe someone will argue, well, he shouldn't have fired his gun when all that was being aimed at him was a taser. That'll have to be sorted out by their system in Georgia, sorted out by whoever looks into this. But I do want to make the point back to the beginning of this show and the kind of the ongoing issue in America, this just completely ludicrous idea that we should defund the police. I want to ask you to think about, why would anyone in America, a young man or woman who's always wanted to be a police officer, who looks at the way the public speaks and talks about police officers, looks at the way they are treated, and in this particular case, they actually took, I don't know which of the two officers got punched in the face by Rayshard during this battle, but one of them gets punched in the face. I think it was the officer who fired his gun, but I'm not sure. But the point is, why would any sane person want to be a police officer? The public doesn't back them. The media doesn't back them. The Democrat Party doesn't back them. They are constantly being vilified by the media, by the left, by Black Lives Matter, by Antifa, by the New York Times. New York Times is implicitly backing this idea that we should abolish the police. And you think about this guy, this officer, in that split second where he's been on the ground wrestling with this guy. He's been punched in the face. The guy is aiming a taser gun at him. And by the way, two more things I want to mention about this case. If Rayshard had succeeded in tasing the officer, who knows what he would have done next? Maybe he would have come back toward the officer while he was in a tased, immobilized state, couldn't do anything, and retrieved the officer's real gun. Maybe he would have, tried to use that as a threat against the other officer because he's now got the officer's gun. And the other point about it is, back to this officer interaction, there are people saying, well, why couldn't they just leave the guy alone? So he's asleep in his car. But the thing was, he's asleep in his car drunk. And if the police had gone and talked with him and realized and administered this breathalyzer and realized, he's drunk, he shouldn't be driving, he's too drunk to drive. But the officers had said, well, you know what, buddy, just sleep it off here. Just sleep it off till you're sober and then drive home. Or go ahead and drive home, but just be careful. And on the way home, Rayshard had ended up in some collision caused by his being drunk. The officers had to try to arrest him, is my point. You can't leave someone in a drunk condition, obviously drunk enough to fall asleep in the drive-through lane of a Wendy's. You cannot let that person just sit there in the car. And yet we had, as you well know, in Atlanta, we had a major incident after that. The Wendy's was burned down, that there's massive riots and windows broken, all the kind of stuff that happens. But people, I want to say about this struggle we're in this country, about race. This incident will obviously be analyzed, will be investigated, it'll be talked about. His name will be, Rayshard Brooks will be another person whose name is added to the litany of cases in which it seems as though there was systemic racism engaged in by the police department or by the justice system. But when you know those facts, at the very least, it should help you to be able to assess, maybe in this case, sad, unfortunate as this case was, this officer wasn't out of line. I don't know what the outcome will be. I don't know what the investigation will be. But the officer is not, as the left perpetually tries to paint the picture. You can hardly get up in the morning without being possibly, as a Black American, you can't get up in the morning, walk out of your house to go to the park or to walk your dog or whatever you're doing without undergoing a threat of being attacked randomly by police officers who drive by and randomly hassle Black citizens who are just going for a walk in the park. These facts matter. It matters to understand all of the facts that led up to this. And by the way, I'm pretty sure someone involved, I think it was the chief, I'm not sure which person said it, someone involved in this case actually made reference to that set of facts I just told you and described it as that Rayshard Brooks was killed because he was sleeping while Black. As though the reason he was killed is because he was sleeping in his car versus what I just told you. The entire tape, by the way, is a little over 1 minute. It's just slightly over 1 minute. It's not a long tape. It's too rough to play for this show. I don't want to play because you're watching a man, being killed, and I think that's pretty rough to watch. But if you want to see these facts and if you question yourself what I'm saying, you ought to watch it yourself. I'm going to tell you just a quick story before I turn to my last story for today. So on my personal Facebook page, and I will copy it when I get home onto my show Facebook page, America Can We Talk, there was a great posting about by a woman who lives in Myrtle Beach at the beach. And she talked about, she's a white woman, 45 years old, and had the same repairman come to her house for 20 years or something. Fixes everything in her house and installs her new dishwasher and all that kind of stuff. Really great guy. He's Black, she's white. And she wrote this thing on Facebook talking about when he came over last week or 2 weeks ago. She said to him, "How are you doing?" Just kind of checking how he was doing. And to cut to the chase, to skip the whole long story, but I will put up for you to read. She asked him, well, all these riots going on, what do you think about, the racial, the tension in America and the argument that Black Americans are treated unfairly by police? What's your view? What's your life experience? So he tells her, I get pulled over, and I think it was 5 to 6 times a month. I mean, he's got a business. He's got a van with a business on it, whatever it is, Joe's Handyman, whatever it was called. She doesn't say. But he's got a business, and he's driving around his business van with his plumbing and other, tools and whatever he needs in the van, and he's getting pulled over 5 to 6 times a month by police officers who are saying, what are you doing? What are all his receipts for? What's all this equipment for? Questioning him, hassling him. So I'm telling you the story to say, I know America is not a perfect country. Police are not perfect. We have had, in some pockets and maybe everywhere, some officers who engage in this kind of conduct. The great thing about this story was, so she told this story on Facebook. She ended up having a local news station call her and say, why don't you come in with the guy, the repairman guy, and the two of you together, just tell this story. So they told their story on the local news in Myrtle Beach. Then the mayor called them and said, hey, you know what? I want to talk to you. I want to hear about this. I'm getting at the idea we may need to have a lot of conversations about race in this country. I'm not claiming America is a perfect nation and no racist things ever occur. Of course they do. There are people of every skin color who are racist. Every skin color. And when we can have sane conversations, when we can have factual conversations, when we can talk about this guy's story in Myrtle Beach, and we can talk about other people's stories in life and try to deal with them and have police officers and communities and America as a community try to resolve issues, it's a wonderful thing. And these do happen all the time. This one just happened to get a lot of attention. I'm getting at the idea, though, that if you have radical demands by Black Lives Matter and Antifa supposedly springing from the incident in Minnesota, and so you want abandon the police, defund the police, abolish the police, community justice, we're going to be the wild, wild west, and we're going to have Antifa decide what the rules are and who's in charge. When you have demands like that, you actually end up shutting down the really good and healthy conversations that do need to happen. Conversations like this woman described in Myrtle Beach, where she said it was actually a great community healing thing. Many people talked about it, commented on Facebook. This is a great story, great to know and understand. We can have a lot of good conversations. Most Americans, I will say for the rest of my life, most Americans and most police officers, most people in America, men and women of every race, ethnicity, and national origin, the vast majority are good, noble people who do not want to live in a racist country, who always want to try to make things better, who are always trying to improve, make America a more perfect union. There are millions of Americans, the vast majority, who feel that way. But what we're watching, the Black Lives Matter violence, the absurd demands to defund or abolish the police, to end capitalism, to let violent people out of prison, these things are not only are they not going to help America reach better answers, but they tend to drown out the really good stories and the important conversations we should be having, like the lady in Myrtle Beach, North Carolina. Actually, I always forget, North or South Carolina, whatever it is, Myrtle Beach. So I wanted to say there's an important, I think that there's too much conversation at these very tense times, these toxic times that are saying it's one or the other. It's the entire Black Lives Matter agenda and everything they say, or you're a racist and you don't care about people. And I think the truth is the Black Lives Matter agenda that is melded with Antifa, melded with the fascists, with the leftists who are Antifa, melded with the defund police, end police, abolish police. That whole agenda actually deprives America of the rightful kind of conversations the vast majority of us want to have.